we're getting ready for Christmas. We're kicking off a new series today. How many of you are pumped for Christmas? Okay, awesome. By show of hands, how many of you would consider Christmas to be your favorite holiday? Okay. Very interestingly, something similar happened in both services. The majority of people who said that Christmas was their favorite holiday were sitting on the floor. Meanwhile, the balcony, not so much. And I would expect no less for people who are all about cheer to be on the floor. Meanwhile, I sat in the balcony for like 10 years in Durant. I know why you sit up there. It's to just kind of hide in the back. So I'm a fellow balcony person with you. Love you guys. But yeah, so we're excited for Christmas to come. And my kids especially. My kids are super excited. In our closet, in the master closet, we have Christmas decorations stored, and that's where they've been for a while. And like every day since July, my 3-year-old has walked in, my 3-year-old daughter, Gracie. She's walked into that closet with all of the Christmas decorations, and she starts begging us to go ahead and start decorating for Christmas. And I'm like, Gracie, I love you, but it's July, okay? Only crazy people decorate their house for Christmas this early. I'm kidding. Anyone already decorated by July? Okay. August? September? October? Okay. That does not surprise me at all. So Gracie has been begging us since July to decorate for Christmas, to which we keep saying no. Well, the day that she finally walked in and woke up to the Christmas decorations being out, I mean, she went crazy. Like, her eyes were wide open and she was running around and hugging everything. Like the little inflatable things that you put out in your yard, she was hugging the tree, just everything, just soaking it all in. And it's beyond just like the gift part of Christmas, but there's something about this time of year, especially with kids, that you see something in their eyes. And it's the same thing that you see if you ever sit down with a child and you read them a book. And as you're reading this book, with each page that you turn, there's they have this wide-eyed look, and they're just entrenched in the story, and they're caught up in it. And that a word that I use to describe that, or one of the words that you could use, is the word wonder. There is a wonder that's in the air. And, as you grow, as you mature, there are things that are childish that are to be put aside, to be grown out of and matured beyond. Like throwing fits, things like that. But there are things that are childlike that are to be retained, that as we grow and as we mature, that we still keep this childlike quality or these qualities about us. And I think wonder is one of those childlike qualities, that as we grow, as we mature, we are still to retain this sense of wonder, this sense of surprise and beauty and amazement and awe in life. And I've thought about, as we come up on this Christmas season as adults, what does that look like to approach it with a sense of wonder? And, you don't have to look very far to see that not all is well in this world. Not all is as it should be. And you can look out over the world, you can look out over the country, but odds are you probably don't need to look any further than your own life or the lives of people that you know and are connected to know that there is still an immense amount of injustice or hurt or pain or brokenness that exists in this world. And, for me, Advent is what salvaged a sense of wonder with Christmas. Because in this time of Advent, as you come up and as we approach Christmas, we enter into the story of Jesus' first coming, his first advent, which advent is this word that comes from a Latin root that means coming or arrival. And so when we look at and we tell these stories and we involve ourselves in the narrative of Jesus' first advent or his first coming, and all of the hope that we see in these stories, that one day the Messiah would come, this hope of the world, this light of the world would come and start making things right, bringing salvation and grace into the world. And now, where we sit today, we are still in need of hope, still in need of peace, still in need of joy. And so, as we involve ourselves in the story of his first coming, we also put ourselves in the story, also hoping for his second coming, his second advent, when he shows up in glory, revealing new creation, and all that is wrong to be made right. That is the hope, our blessed hope. And what we're going to do over the series and over the next few weeks is we're going to be involving ourselves in the Advent story, in the first coming of Jesus from the chapters of Luke 1 and 2. We're going to be looking at different people's stories. Today, we're going to kick things off with the story of Zachariah and Elizabeth. So you can find this story in Luke chapter 1. And we're going to do this a little differently, okay? Because if you've been here for a few years, you know that this is a common passage that we'll teach out of and we'll share during Advent. And so because it's already familiar and because the series is about awakening wonder, I figured we would do it a little different this morning. So this is important, okay? So you really need this context. If you're going to check out at some point during the message, which happens, okay? No shame there. It happens. But if you're going to check out, please don't check out right now because this is really important context, okay? I'm going to tell the story of Zachariah and Elizabeth from the perspective of Zachariah. So I'm going to be sharing it with a first-person perspective, okay? So what that means is, and this is why this is important to know, is because I will say things like, my wife Elizabeth, okay? And if you know me, you know that my wife's name is not Elizabeth. My wife's name is Abby, okay? But I have a sister-in-law who's named Elizabeth, okay? So that's how rumors get started. So really important that we all have this context. And I'm going to give you permission to talk in church because if somebody walks in late and doesn't get this context, they're going to be really confused. And as I said already, like this is how people start talking. And I really don't need this rumor floating around that I'm now married to my sister-in-law. It would just be not good for anyone. So if someone logs on late, let them know. If someone walks in late, let them know. Another little caveat here is I really encourage you, if you haven't already, to check out our Advent plan that you can find on our app or website, or on your own, go and find an Advent devotional because it'll take you through these passages, or at the bare minimum, go and read Luke chapter 1 and 2 on your own. So I'm going to, we mentioned the chosen earlier. I'm going to tell a story in that kind of fashion, in that I will be telling it from what I believe to be congruent with what the scriptures teach. However, it will not be like a verbatim reading or reciting of the scriptures. So I'll be that's the Southern talk coming out. If you're joining the global community, sometimes we talk a little Southern drawl down here in Texas, but not feeling, but I'll be filling in the gaps with just what it might have been like for Zachariah and Elizabeth to walk through what they walked through. Okay, so does that make sense? Okay. If it doesn't, you could get over it. That's one option. You could talk to somebody afterwards and then listen to it again. Okay, so here we go. Luke chapter 1, story of Zachariah and Elizabeth as told from the perspective of Zachariah. In the days of Herod, that's when my story picks up. In the days of Herod, my wife and I were on the brink of the greatest miracle of our lives, but we didn't know it yet. By this time, we both were well into our later years. Our hair has grayed, our strength has waned, but our love for God and our love for one another has remained. We enjoyed a life together, living faithfully to one another and living faithfully to our God, keeping his commandments carefully and enjoying a clear conscience before him. And as a priest by trade, that's what my job is I was a priest. And my wife, Elizabeth, her family comes from they're descendants of Aaron. So her whole family are priests. So keeping the commandments of God was something that even at an early age was really important to us. And I share that not to say that we did things perfectly, because we both had our moments, but knowing that we lived righteously before God is, I think, an important background and an important context for what comes next in our story. You see, we couldn't conceive a child because my wife was barren. And this was, without a doubt, the heaviest burden that we carried in our life. Our life wasn't free of hardships or struggles, much like you. For us, at that time, we, our area, our people were living under a foreign occupation. So another empire came into our homes, our land, and set up shop. And that was a burden, a heavy burden. But that burden was shared amongst all of our people. And something about that burden being shared across all of our people, even though it was heavy, you knew that other people were in it with you. Whereas, the burden of barrenness felt like it was ours alone to bear. And early on in our life and our youth, we had all of these hopes and dreams and expectations about how life was going to go. And this is not how we thought it would play out. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, where you think that life is going to, you have all these hopes and expectations for your life to look one way, and life doesn't always go the way that we expect. And that's where we were. We had our plans. Our plans were things like how big of a table we would need for our family meals to sit all of our kids and our grandkids, But turns out that life didn't play out the way that we expected it to. Early on in our marriage, we weren't too concerned. These things take time, right? We would have people come up to us and say, they'd try to encourage us, and they'd say, listen, it took us a while too to conceive. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. I'm sure you know how these things work, so I'm going to spare you the details. But let's just say we were on this roller coaster ride of hope and disappointment. That with every month, there was this hope that maybe this is the time. Maybe our prayer has finally been heard and will be answered, and we'll see the desire of our heart come to pass. And with each month, we were slapped in the face with disappointment. It didn't help with those who knew us well. Would be encouraging those who didn't and were a bit at a distance. When we'd get together for events, they'd say things like, "Are you guys ever going to have kids? What are you waiting on?" And we just kind of nodded, and we didn't want to make a scene or anything. And later, that would be something that we talked about and cried about together. So this was my disappointment and our burden that we carried. For you, it may look differently. If you've ever had something that you expected or hoped for and dreamed for and it didn't come to pass, for you, it may be within your career or your relationships, marriages. It may also be barrenness. But this feeling of hoping and then only to be confronted once again with disappointment. Months turned into years and years turned into decades, and no longer were people comparing our situation to theirs. They were comparing our situation to Abraham and Sarah's, who they were like, God has done something like this for people your age before, so, maybe he'll do it again. And I know they were trying to help, and, through that span of time, we would see family and friends be able to conceive and receive this blessing that we were hoping for. And every time that happened, it was this bag of mixed emotions, because on one hand, obviously, we were thrilled for them, so happy and so excited for them. But I'd be lying if I told you that every time that announcement came out that there wasn't also what felt like a punch to the gut. And I wish that wasn't so. I wish that it was only happiness and excitement for them. But the reality is that every time that would come out, it would just this painful feeling beneath the surface of knowing, like, man, that's something that we're hoping for and praying for, yet it hasn't happened for us. And I didn't blame them, and I didn't blame my wife either. I wasn't resentful of her. My heart didn't grow hard towards her. My heart hurt for her, because she would tell these stories of, when she was a little girl and she would play with her doll, and she couldn't wait for the day that she had children of her own to nurture and to care for and to pray for. And prayer. And we prayed every day. We prayed fervently over the course of years for her womb to be open and for us to be able to conceive. And, over that period of time, praying that same prayer over and over and over, what it eventually started doing is we grew tired, weary, and disappointment led to a sense of hopelessness, really, that we felt hopeless and helpless. Like we had done everything that we knew to do, but still we weren't receiving or seeing the desire of our heart. And that was hard for both of us. And over the course of this time, like these questions started setting in of, does God hear me? Have you ever thought that? Does God hear me? Does he see me? Am I hidden from him? Does he even care about what we're going through? And as a priest, we're not supposed to have those questions, but I did. And, the meaning of names in our culture is really important. And the meaning of my name, Zachariah, means remembered by God. And I felt anything but that. I felt like God had forgotten us. But the answer to those questions that I had of, does God hear me? Does he see me? Does he care? The answer to those questions came on the biggest day of my career. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a priest. And when you think of that, you may think like there's only a handful of people who did that job and we got to go into the temple and serve every day. But that's not the case. I was one of 18,000 priests at the time. okay? So what that means is because there were so many of us, I only got to serve at the temple 2 times a year, and only once in my lifetime did I get to go in and serve the daily offering by offering the incense in the holy place. So this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and on this particular day, my number got called. And so I got to go, and obviously, as you might imagine, with it being the biggest day of your career, there's already a bit of nerves involved here. And I'm thinking, okay, keep yourself together, hold your composure, you're going to go in, you're going to do the thing, and then you're going to leave, and it's going to be great. Just enjoy this because you only get to do this once. And so I walked in to the holy place to do my thing, and an angel appeared, like a real-life angel. The thing that you read about happened to me. And I would love to say that I played it off cool. No big deal. Hey, it's an angel. I expected this. But that's not true, okay? They talk about like people having different reactions to surprises, and some fight, some flight, some freeze. I froze. I'm a freezer. Any other freezers? Like any other freezers in the house? I understand that putting you on the spot probably made you freeze. So I'm sorry for that. But yeah, I'm a freezer. So this angel showed up, and I am scared stiff, terrified. And I'll never forget the first words that he said to me. He said, "Don't be afraid. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife will conceive a son, and you'll name him John." My prayer has been heard. Years, decades of praying this prayer and wondering if God even hears me, if he sees me. And now I know God heard me all along. God heard me. And the angel went on to say that my son will turn the hearts of sons and daughters back to the Lord. That he'll be like Elijah, and that he'll be filled with the Spirit from the time he's born. And that he'll get the people ready for God. It's my son. And what comes next is not my proudest moment. You see, surface level, that's all really good and exciting news. But I had been hardened over years and decades of disappointment. Hardened to the point that I couldn't even receive this news from an angel directly sent by God. Disappointment will do that to you. Disappointment will harden you, and it hardened me. And so this angel gives me this great news, and my response is, do you really expect me to believe that? I'm an old man, my wife, an old woman, and I don't know if you get this lesson up in heaven as an angel, but this presents a problem. Okay, the batteries on her biological clock have expired. This is impossible. Impossible. And I'm speaking out of pain, out of hurt. And as you might imagine, an angel essentially being called a liar did not go over well. And his response back, the first response is like all happy, great news. Hey, I've got this great news for you. The tone changed a little bit in the second speech. And it was, man, do you know who I am? I am Gabriel, is what he said. I'm Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and he told me directly to come and tell you these words. And let me tell you this. Every word that God says comes to pass. Every word will come true on time. God's time. And he said, because of your attitude, here's what's going to happen. You're not going to be able to talk until all of this comes to pass. And whatever it is in your brain that tells your mouth to talk just failed on me. It was shut off. I could think, I could pray, but for the life of me, I couldn't say a word. And also, this is taking a lot longer, like this interaction that I had with the angel was taking a lot longer than what I was supposed to be doing is supposed to take. And so the people outside waiting on me, they're getting a little nervous, thinking, did he drop dead in there? Like, do we need to pull him out or what? And, so thankfully I walked out. They were somewhat happy about that, but I couldn't talk. So I ran home and I rushed home to tell my wife this great news. And so after, some extensive charades and a mix of sign language, I was able to get the message across. And she believed me. And we mixed faith with this word that God gave us. And we conceived. We conceived. The thing that we had been hoping for and longing for so long happened. We were, at least I was. I was hopeless, helpless. And yet, God chose us. For whatever reason, he chose us to weave into his story. And after we conceived, we were thrilled and excited. My wife decided to go somewhere else, move off for about 5 months. Okay, charades gets old after a while, as you might imagine. But I think really the reason for her moving off for that period of time was that she was carrying a miracle that other people couldn't see yet. See, where we're from, she was known as barren Elizabeth. Like, her identity was her barrenness. And so she's now, like, this word has come to pass and she has conceived, yet you can't tell yet. So she's carrying this promise that other people can't see. And whenever you're carrying a promise that's not yet obvious to others, you just need to be mindful of the people that you surround yourself with. And so after about 5 months, she comes back, and now it's evident she's showing. She has that pregnancy glow, as they say. But shortly after her arrival, one of her relatives shows up as well. Her name is Mary, and she brought with her some good news as well. And Mary stayed with us for about 3 months, and she left right before the delivery of our son. And so the big day finally came about 9 months later, and from the conception, about 9 months, the big day, and my son was born. And our friends, our family, just everyone was so excited for us and happy for us. And so the day came, 8 days later, they came to circumcise our son. And whenever they came in, they were calling our son Zachariah, because in our culture, it's customary to name the son after the father. And my wife was saying, no, like his name is John. And so they kind of get in a bit of a disagreement because, doctors think they know everything. That's a joke. It's a joke. If you're a doctor, I love you and I'm thankful for you. And so they get in this disagreement, and they look at me and they say, are you aware that your wife is trying to name your son, your firstborn son, after another man? Are you okay with this? And remember, I still can't talk. And so I grab a tablet, not the kind you're thinking of, but I grab a tablet, and on it I write, his name is John. John means Yahweh has been gracious. His name is John. And from the moment that I wrote that, I was filled with the Holy Spirit, and I could talk again. I could speak. And this is what I said. I began to prophesy. Luke 1, verse 67. This is what I said in that moment. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel. He came and set his people free. He set the power of salvation in the center of our lives and in the very house of David, his servant, just as he promised long ago through the preaching of his holy prophets. Deliverance from our enemies in every hateful hand. Mercy to our fathers as he remembers to do what he said he'd do. God has not forgotten his promises. He is faithful to do all that he said he'd do. What he swore to our father Abraham, a clean rescue from the enemy camp, so we can worship him without a care in the world, made holy before him as long as we live. And you, now speaking to my son, you, my child, prophet of the highest, will go ahead of the master and prepare his ways. Present the offer of salvation to his people, the forgiveness of their sins. Through the heartfelt mercies of our God, God's sunrise will break in upon us, shining on those in the darkness, those sitting in the shadow of death, then showing us the way, one foot at a time, down the path of peace. After this happened, the fear of the Lord and wonder spread throughout the whole land, because our people, had been waiting for so long for something like this to happen. It had been hundreds of years since we had even heard God speak to us through his prophets. And we would we would be told by our parents and grandparents and this story of the coming Messiah, that one day the Messiah will come and he will set us free. And these would be the same stories that we would convey down to our children and others. And there was this hope and this waiting for this snake-crushing Messiah to come and to be king. And here we are. It was so clear, so evident that God is up to something, that he's doing something, and for whatever reason, he's involving us in it. I never thought in those moments of being tired and worn out and hopeless and helpless that our son would be the one who prepared the way for the Messiah. The one who would come and invite those like us who are tired and worn out. He would invite them to come to him, and that he would give them rest. I want to close with this. It's a couple readings from Isaiah chapter 40. And the first one is a reading about my son. I had heard this, read many times, but little did I know, or I would ever suspect, that this would be that this would be a prophecy about my son. Some people have pictures of their kids. I have a prophecy. So that's what I'm going to read to you first. So Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 through 5. Comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare is ended. Her iniquity is pardoned. She has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. And uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken, and what God has said will come to pass in time. This second part from Isaiah that I want to read. The first one was about my son. The second part is about me and others like me who are in a place of waiting, wondering if you've ever been in those places, or maybe you are now, of asking that question, does God hear me? Does he see me? Am I hidden from him? Isaiah 40, starting in 27. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel? My way is hidden from the Lord, and my right is disregarded by my God. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Amen. Amen. That's Luke chapter 1 from the perspective of Zachariah. So church, as we prepare for this season and Christmas and all that it brings, which is typically a lot of busyness, a lot of lists and things that need to get done and all of that, let us not just go through this with just the typical routines, caught up in the whirlwind of consumerism and all of that mess. Let us go into it with an awareness, an open-eyed wonder, a wide-eyed wonder that God took on flesh and became human, and Christ has come. And in the midst of all of this brokenness, in the midst of all of this injustice, that God is going to come again, and everything that is wrong will be made right. Everything that is lifted too high will be brought down low, and everything that is disregarded and too low will be brought up. That Jesus is coming. So I encourage you, whether that's the Advent reading plans that we're providing as a church that you can find through the app or the website, or maybe you have your own Advent reading plan. Highly encourage us as we go through the weeks leading up to Christmas, that we do it with this intentionality that cultivates and stirs this eager and hopeful anticipation of Christ's coming. Amen.